The courtroom hummed with anxious whispers, a murmur that seemed to swirl around the high ceilings like a brewing storm. At the center of it all stood an elderly woman, her fragile hands gripping the edge of the wooden podium as though it were the only thing anchoring her to the earth. Her name was Eleanor Whitmore. She was 83 years old, and today she found herself standing before a judge in a courtroom she had never dreamed of entering, accused of crimes she could scarcely comprehend. Her wrinkled face was pale, and her wide, uncertain eyes darted around the room as if searching for something or someone that might deliver her from this nightmare. Her heart pounded violently in her chest, each beat echoing the disbelief that consumed her. She had lived her life by simple rules: be kind, help where you can, and do no harm. Yet now, the weight of the world seemed to press down on her shoulders, heavy and suffocating. Eleanor Whitmore, known throughout Willow Creek as the kindest soul in town, was now branded a criminal. She had spent her twilight years in service to others. Every morning, she volunteered at the local animal shelter. She baked pies and cookies for her neighbors every Sunday. Her garden bloomed with vibrant roses and vegetables, which she often shared with families who had little. She had been a mother, a friend, a pillar of the community. And now, she was a defendant. High above the courtroom, seated behind an imposing bench of dark mahogany, Judge Clarence Monroe loomed. His cold, blue eyes seemed to peer straight through Eleanor, as if he were looking not for truth, but for confirmation of his own judgment. His reputation preceded him, strict, unwavering, but also whispered to be deeply corrupt. There were rumors, of course, stories about how he favored the powerful and silenced those who lacked the means to defend themselves. But no one had ever proven anything. No one had dared. Until today, Judge Monroe adjusted his glasses and stared down at Eleanor with thinly veiled contempt. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, his tone sharp enough to cut glass, "you stand accused of theft and fraud. The evidence against you is, as the prosecution has stated, overwhelming." Eleanor's lips trembled as she found her voice. "Your Honor, I have done nothing wrong," she said, the desperation clear in her tone. "I have lived in Willow Creek my entire life. I've never stolen anything, not a penny, not a thing." But the judge wasn't listening. He smirked, leaning back in his chair, a cruel amusement flickering in his gaze. "The law does not bend for sentimental stories, Mrs. Whitmore," he replied. "The prosecution has submitted irrefutable evidence, bank statements showing a large sum of money transferred directly into your account. This is not a misunderstanding. It's fraud. Now, explain to this court how that happened." Eleanor shook her head slowly, her eyes brimming with tears. I don't know," she whispered. "I never received any money. There must be a mistake." Judge Monroe leaned forward, his voice lowering dangerously. "Then how do you explain the witness who claims they saw you making large withdrawals from that very account?" The air in the room thickened. Eleanor gripped the podium harder, her frail knuckles turning white. Someone must have forged my name," she pleaded. "I swear to you, I have nothing to do with this." The judge rapped his gavel once, the sharp crack making Eleanor flinch. "Enough," he said coldly. "I have heard enough." The room went silent, every eye on the trembling woman at the podium. "Given your age," Judge Monroe continued, "I am considering a lenient sentence. 10 years in prison." A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. Eleanor's knees nearly gave out beneath her. 10 years, she whispered, her voice hollow. "That will be the rest of my life." Judge Monroe offered her a look of false sympathy, but the malice behind his eyes remained. "Perhaps you should have thought about that before breaking the law," he said smoothly. Eleanor's hand trembled as she reached into her purse. She pulled out an old cell phone, her fingers fumbling over the buttons. It was her last hope. She dialed a number she knew by heart. The courtroom watched in tense silence as she lifted the phone to her ear. "Hello, Mama," came a deep voice from the other end. Eleanor swallowed back a sob. "Adam, sweetheart, I need your help. I'm in court. They're accusing me of something I didn't do." The voice on the line hardened instantly. What courthouse, Mama? Adam asked, his tone low and controlled. Eleanor's breath hitched. Judge Clarence Monroe. He's presiding. There was a pause. A heavy pause. Stay strong, Adam said finally. I'm on my way. Eleanor lowered the phone slowly, her tear-filled eyes rising to meet Judge Monroe's cold gaze. But now there was something different in her expression. Not fear, not desperation, but a quiet, growing resolve. My son is coming, she said firmly. The judge chuckled. And who exactly is your son? A retired police officer? A small-town lawyer? His voice was dripping with condescension. Eleanor drew in a steadying breath. No, Your Honor. My son is Adam Whitmore, the United States Attorney General. A stunned silence swept the room, followed by hushed murmurs of disbelief. Judge Monroe's face paled visibly, his composure cracking ever so slightly. Moments later, the heavy doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. All heads turned. In strode a tall, commanding figure in a tailored navy blue suit. His presence was undeniable, his very footsteps ringing with purpose against the marble floor. His eyes were locked on the bench at the front of the room, and they burned with a righteous fury. Judge Monroe, Adam said in a voice that filled the courtroom, calm but carrying the weight of law and justice. I suggest you consider your next words very carefully. The judge's confident veneer crumbled. Mr. Whitmore, Adam held up a hand, silencing him. I've reviewed my mother's case, he said, stepping forward and placing a thick, well-worn file on the clerk's desk. The evidence against her is fabricated. The bank statements were altered. Her account was hacked. The witness testimony was forged. Every piece of evidence submitted to this court is a lie. The prosecutor stood abruptly. That's absurd. We have documented proof. Adam opened the file, pulling out document after document. You have forgeries, he corrected. Here is the official bank statement, certified this morning, confirming unauthorized access to my mother's account. Here are forensic reports from independent experts verifying that the signatures were forged and the witness statement tampered with. He turned to the gallery. And here are sworn affidavits from financial analysts and cybersecurity specialists who confirm this was a deliberate setup. The judge's hands shook as he fumbled with his gavel. I was unaware. Adam's stare was unrelenting. You were aware. You just didn't care. The silence was suffocating. Turning to the bailiff, Adam spoke with authority. Dismiss this case. Now, the bailiff wide-eyed nodded. Yes, sir. The gavel fell with a hollow echo. Case dismissed. Judge Monroe croaked, his face slick with sweat. But Adam wasn't finished. And one more thing, he said, stepping closer to the bench. You, Judge Monroe, are under investigation for corruption. My office has already gathered extensive evidence of your misconduct. You will be held accountable. The judge's lips moved, but no sound came out. His days of power and impunity had come to an abrupt end. Eleanor's tears flowed freely now, not from fear, but from relief. Her son stepped to her side, wrapping his strong arms around her frail shoulders. I love you, Mama, Adam whispered, holding her close. No one will ever hurt you again. The courtroom erupted in cheers. Journalists flooded the space, cameras flashing, capturing the moment truth triumphed over injustice. Eleanor Whitmore, once the humble old woman accused of fraud, had become a symbol of resilience and hope. In the weeks that followed, Judge Monroe's corrupt empire crumbled. Investigations revealed a long history of bribery, unjust rulings, and lives ruined by his greed. He was arrested, tried, and sentenced, and his fall from power sparked a wave of reform across the state. People who had once feared the system now found their voices. Justice was no longer an illusion. It was a promise. As for Eleanor, she returned to her simple life. She baked pies. She tended her garden. But now, she was more than a kind old woman. She was living proof that faith, love, and truth could bring down the walls of corruption. One sunny afternoon, as she and Adam walked out of the courthouse hand in hand, Eleanor squeezed his fingers gently. You fought for me, she said softly. just like I fought for you when you were little." Adam smiled down at her. "And I always will, Mama. No one messes with my family." Across town, the news of Monroe's downfall spread like wildfire. People rejoiced. Justice had spoken, and this time it spoke for the innocent. Moral of the story: never underestimate the power of truth and love. Even when the world feels dark and unjust, justice has a way of finding the light. Stand up for what is right, even when the odds are against you. Show kindness. You never know who someone is or who they might call. One act of courage can change everything. As Eleanor and Adam walked away, the sun bathed them in golden light. Hope had been restored, and justice had prevailed.